Jane Austen was born December 16th, 1775. Her father was a reverend, and she was one of 8 siblings. She only had 1 sister and 6 brothers, which kind of sucks. Her education was really low due to the fact that women weren't really allowed to have an education at that time. But her father always did want them to have an education, so she did. She got an at-home education and was able to learn reading, writing, which, while a child, she actually started writing poems, short stories, or just paragraphs, which actually brought in her love of writing. As her life went on, she published many books. Her first being Sense and Sensibility, and she also published Emma, Pride and Prejudice, Northanger Abbey, Persuasion, Mansfield Park, Lady Susan. Now, these were her most popular ones. She did have a lot of other ones, including short stories. But she did die July 18th, 1817, at the age of 41. Now, Sense and Sensibility was her first book, and she actually had to post it anonymously so that she wouldn't get any backlash from her own life. The thing that she did write on there, though, was that it was made by a woman. Now, this story is based on her life. When her father passed away, they were forced out of their home and had to live with other family. And it basically just shows how women were treated then, even in her actual life. And in her actual life, she was a feminist and was actually a face of many feminist arguments, and was very well known in England. Now, this book was basically a failure at first because it was written by a woman, but as the years went on, it became very successful and became a literary classic known today. Here is a summary of Sense and Sensibility. At the beginning of the novel, Marianne and Eleanor's father dies. His land had to be left to his son John. John's father made him promise to take care of his stepmother and his stepsisters, which there were 3 of them. The youngest one isn't really talked about as much in the story. But his wife, Fanny, was very rude and convinced him to kick them out, saying that they would be a financial burden to him and his father shouldn't have expected him to do that. Well, she was able to convince John to kick out his family, and they went to live with other family. After they moved to their new home, Marianne meets a man who wanted to marry her, but she was not really liking that idea. His name was Colonel Brandon. He was 20 years older than her, which is kind of weird, and is known for his formal love. So he wasn't really romantic at all. He was very oh, I'm gonna marry you, and that's it. So she ended up refusing his proposal, even though it would have been a very smart idea to accept in this time. After she says no to him, Marianne meets a man named John. She believes he is very romantic, and she falls in love with him. And she also considered him very handsome. Now, to find out, John was actually a gold digger, and then he ended up leaving Marianne for an heiress. She was heartbroken and decided to marry Colonel Brandon for a sensible reason, since he had money and was able to provide for her. While all of the events were going on in Marianne's life, Eleanor had her own things going on. Eleanor and Fanny's brother, Edward, were falling in love. Now, Edward had some things going on. He had a secret fiancée named Lucy the entire time that they were together. And this caused Eleanor to bottle up her emotions so that she wouldn't really be seen as anything. Down the road, Eleanor hears that a Mr. Ferris is married, and she thinks it is Edward, which makes her really heartbroken. Eleanor is surprised to know that Lucy married Edward's brother, Robert, instead, which she still didn't expect to see Edward after that, and so she just kind of went on about her life. Eleanor sees Edward and he proposes, which she says yes to, leaving the guy she was going to marry because he was able to provide for her and give her good money and basically give her everything she needed in life. Now, I mean, obviously that's not really that good to show you because it's terrible, but here's a trailer just to give more insight to it. The plot fits into the feminist theory because the patriarchy shown at the beginning of the novel, where John is given the property and they had to go with what they had because they were not able to be passed down any property or money or anything. Women were kind of seen as property and didn't have really many rights, and they were supposed to marry the guy that was going to be able to provide for them the most. Women were treated very poorly and they were not really able to make their own choices. The only reason why Eleanor and Marianne were able to choose who they married was because their father had passed away and there was no really anybody else to control their life. The characters in the story, mostly the women, help push the story as a feminist story. The first thing of there being two heroines is very unique to this time period due to the fact that women were not really seen in books. They were more in the background and didn't really have a point, and which is really nice about Jane Austen's writing because not only did she have one, she had two. Now, Marianne was the emotional and outgoing one. As stated in an essay on feminism, Marianne embraces spontaneous, excessive sensibility, love of nature, and romantic idealism. This shows how Marianne was very loving. Marianne was also very dramatic. Whenever a man helped her, she fell in love with him immediately. She ignores what society wants her to do and what her sister warns. A suitors ignored by Marianne due to his age and formal love. She knows very deeply what she wants and all her emotions show. She is the exact definition of the word sensibility. So her characteristics is basically what a woman was supposed to be and how a woman was seen. Emotional, always thinking about what she wants, but most women didn't act on what they wanted in that point in that era. So Marianne was both what women were seen as, but she acted out how she wanted to and not what society thought or anything. So she had both components. Eleanor was the complete opposite. She was the rational one, quiet, kept her emotions in, which is not really how women were thought. Women were thought to be dumb, not able to make their own decisions, and were seen as kind of property, and were thought to be kind of small compared to everyone else. But she also married who she was supposed to. She was also going for who she was supposed to. There was a suitor that proposed to her, and she said yes because she did what she was supposed to do and went with what her mom thought she should do and what society thought she should do. Now, towards the end, both the characters kind of flip. Marianne ends up marrying the man that would be the best for her, and Eleanor kind of runs back to the love of her life. Now, there are some women in the story that show feminism as well, such as Fanny, the wife of John, who convinces John to kick his sisters and stepmother out of the house. Now, most women were not able to speak out like this, and it was very different because even though she was not able to have power to own the home or anything, she was able to control it through her husband. And there's also a character, Lucy. She controls her life. She runs after what she wants and makes a conquest of men. She was supposed to be marrying Edward, but ended up leaving Edward for his brother. And Mrs. Ferris has the power to determine if her sons get the family money and uses this to control their lives. And Mrs. Jennings gets a small bit of power by coordinating dances, dinners, and parties, which this can also be argued to be what women were supposed to do at that time. But I see it as her taking what little bit of control that is allowed for her. Women getting powers with money and marriage is a ginormous theme in this novel. The idea of fighting for rights in this age is very important to read about now, since women today take the rights we have for granted. The rights are taken for granted because women forget that someone fought for these rights. The feminism feel of this novel helps to fit into the feminist theory. The novel shows how women were treated and seen during this time period as small and weak females that couldn't amount to anything. Light was given to the control of male-dominated society to oppress women, and how women were seen by men as objects to give or take. The important part of the novel is the equality shown in bits and pieces. Jane Austen fought for her feminism in her own life and pushed for it in her novels as well.